Apple started WWDC off with a slight brag about how much Apple Intelligence they delivered last year. And at the same time, there was a minor apology for the delayed features in the form of
This work needed more time to reach our high quality bar, and we look forward to sharing more about it in the coming year.
this was glossed over, but it was more than I thought Apple would do. Talking about AI, the foundational model framework is a great tool for developers, allowing their apps to access on device LLM models, which work offline and also have privacy built in. This will enable both third party apps and Apple's own apps to offer meaningful AI experiences in people's day to day lives. Apple did not spend much time discussing this, but I feel like in a few years, in retrospect, it might be seen as one of the defining features of this WWDC, alongside the new design language across all of Apple's platforms. I think the new design is good, but I might be biased as it is something new and novel. There are definitely places where it does not look as good as the design is replacing, but this is version 1 of the new look, and expecting it to have the same level of polish as what it is replacing isn't really a fair comparison. Since the keynote, I've been online looking at users sharing screenshots of the new UI. I find myself alternating between this is great and this is bad, and it is reminiscent of how I felt when iOS 7 launched. It's not as a drastic change as the shift from skeuomorphism to flat design. The move from iOS 6 to iOS 7 was a complete turnaround. Shadows were gone, depth was gone, and everything became flat. Maybe a bit too flat. But this feels like the next step from flat design. The icons now have layers, and the UI elements have a bit of depth, or should I say liquid glass, which I really like. All that said, this marks a departure from the flat design era on Apple's devices, and it looks quite different from other operating systems out there, especially Android. This is Apple's attempt to be unique and stand out amidst all the other software platforms out there. It also means the look is unified amongst Apple platforms. Consistency is good. That said, it appears there are quite a few accessibility concerns, very much like the reaction when iOS 7 launched. But I'm sure Apple will introduce options to bring the UI back to a usable state for those who need it. When iOS 7 Beta 1 came out, the changes were too drastic, and there were a lot of designers pushing back online. I'm seeing the same reaction now, and it feels like classic Beta 1 behavior for iOS 26. As more versions roll out, I expect Apple to tone down a few things. They should definitely keep the liquid glass elements, but place greater emphasis on accessibility and readability, and perhaps not make the changes quite so extreme. I really like the new clear option that's available alongside the existing light and dark modes. It looks fantastic in motion, though perhaps not quite as good in screenshots. But when interacting with the device, it looks and feels brilliant. They actually renamed the operating systems as rumored, which makes it easier to remember which platform is on what version. Among all the apps that have gone through a redesign, and among the ones demoed during the keynote, I really appreciate the UI changes to the camera app. The camera app had started to feel bloated with all the different modes, but now things have been simplified. If you want the full feature set, it is still there, just tucked away until you need it. The icons have been redesigned too, and I especially like the clock and the camera icons. The camera icon now resembles the one from iOS 6 and earlier, which I've always preferred. I never liked the current camera icon, where the iconography imitates a real camera and not an iPhone camera. Now we are back to how the camera icon initially was, and how it should always been along. One of the iPhone features I really liked was the new call screening and the hold assist features, which I can definitely see myself using. I tend to get a lot of scam calls, and these will definitely help me avoid them. Speaking of phone calls, the live translation feature that they showcased was executed nicely. I'll reserve judgment to see how it performs in the real world use, but it is an impressive little feature, and even more so because it runs entirely on device. The iMessage updates are solid, but as someone living in the UK, most of my friends and family are on WhatsApp. This feels more like catch up features than game changers, but if your friends and family live on iMessage, these can be really helpful. The new Games app is a great addition to the first party lineup. I've always missed the old Game Center app, and I think removing it was a mistake. But now with the Games app, there's finally a unified place for your games to track your progress and compete with friends. This app doesn't really do much, but Apple should have never killed off Game Center in the first place, and I'm glad it's back. The visual intelligence features are fantastic, especially the one where you can take a screenshot of an event and the iPhone automatically pulls up the event details onto your calendar. I've always wanted something like this. There have been multiple times I've received an invite as an image on WhatsApp and had to manually input the details into my calendar app. This feature would make that process seamless. I know Android has had something similar for a while, but it's great to see finally this feature available on the iPhone, and I'm glad to see visual intelligence evolving. It is one of those features I constantly use. I'm aware that this was something that was bundled with the promises of Apple Intelligence features last year, which we never got, and never might, but this would do for now. Workout Buddy is the newest feature aside from the design changes, of course. I don't personally see myself using it as I prefer listening to my music or podcasts without being distracted by notifications while working out. That said, I'll at least give this a try to see if it delivers on its promise. Just because it might not be for me, it could still be a major addition to the Apple Watch and turn out to be one of those features that helps lock people into the Apple Watch and the iPhone ecosystem. The Notes app coming to the watch might not sound like a big deal, but it is long overdue, and I already know it will become one of my most used apps on the watch later. The fresh coat of paint, thanks to liquid glass, can really only be felt in the playback and control center controls. The home screen still looks very similar to the existing tvOS interface. tvOS seems to have the least amount of new features, but the automatic sign-in API is something that should have been available already. If I have an Amazon Prime account, why should I have to spend time logging into the app across all the different platforms? This should simplify the process. It's one of those features you use once and then forget about it, but I'm glad Apple has finally brought it in. Talking about the Mac, I'm not sure if I'm a fan of the redesign. I don't mind liquid glass, but the Mac now looks a bit too much like the iPad, and I do not know if I like my Mac looking like the iPad. I guess that's what you get when you want consistency, but I do hope I warm up to it. Bringing live activities from the iPhone onto the Mac is a pretty nifty idea. The example they showed with Uber Eats is exactly why I'd want something like this. I often place orders on Uber Eats and then have to keep my phone nearby, constantly checking the home screen and the lock screen widget to see how far along my delivery is. That's a perfect example of an iPhone feature making its way to the Mac in a meaningful way. One of the coolest features is the ability to launch iPhone apps via Mac Spotlight, which is simply brilliant. iPhone mirroring, introduced last year, is one of my favorite and most used features in the Apple ecosystem. I'm glad they have now extended it with more capabilities. I tend not to log into social media accounts on my MacBook since it is my machine for serious productivity. But sometimes I want to post things on social media. So I use iPhone mirroring to link to my iPhone and post it from there. Until now, that meant opening iPhone mirroring, searching for the app I needed, and then doing the task. But now this simplifies the process. I can open the app in iPhone mirroring straight from Spotlight in the Mac and get my thing done. We are also getting a native clipboard, which is something I've always wanted, and it's finally here. At the moment, I use Alfred as my clipboard manager. I have a lifetime license for Alfred, but I feel like I may end up switching to Spotlight with macOS Tahoe. I've been considering moving to Raycast for a while, but I haven't had the time to really test it. Now I'm considering jumping straight to Spotlight from Alfred. Of course, Raycast is much more feature-rich, but Spotlight's new features, clearly inspired by Raycast, are genuinely impressive. The way Apple has handled widgets, where you can place, for example, a clock on a wall, and even after rebooting a Vision Pro, it remembers the exact location, is simply brilliant. I know Apple is working on glasses that can display information to you, and when those arrive, features like this will likely come built in. As Apple works to reduce the price of the Vision Pro, this does feel like it's the future of computing. Another standout feature was the shared spatial reality. Two people can put on these glasses and look at the same virtual object or environment, whether it is for gaming or doing something productive like designing in 3D. I really hope Vision Pro becomes the success it deserves to be, because this is the coolest product I've seen from Apple in a long time, easily since the launch of the iPhone. Finally, PSVR 2 controllers can now be paired with Vision Pro, which has been rumored for a while. I'm glad it's finally a reality, as it means more high-end games can come to the Apple Vision Pro. Basically, all the multitasking changes on the iPad introduced during WWDC 25 are what Apple should have done 5 years ago. Over the past few years, Apple has experimented with various design and multitasking paradigms, but this update essentially discards all of them. They've now brought pretty much everything multitasking related from the Mac to the iPad. iPad multitasking is fixed. Finally. Apple could have stopped there and I would have been happy, but they brought over the menu bar to the iPad too, another feature borrowed from the Mac. It finally feels like the iPad is having its moment, where the software has caught up to the hardware. These features are thoughtfully implemented. The iPad can still be a simple device for those who just want a larger iPhone. But if you want the advanced features, they are here too. You could argue that these are Pro features and Apple could have limited them just to the iPad Pro models, but instead, they are rolling out them across the entire iPad lineup. I was genuinely surprised to see multitasking options enabled on my now 7-year-old iPad. There has always been this question: will the Mac get touch support first, or will the iPad gain Mac features first? I suppose this WWDC gave us the answer. This keynote was surprisingly short. It ran around for 90 minutes. I was expecting a full 2-hour presentation. They didn't talk much about AI, which felt quite different from the demos at Google I/O, where AI was the main focus. Apple's approach felt much more grounded. I think what they've shown is enough for this year, but they'll have to seriously step up their AI game next year to stay competitive. That said, it's a good start, and the foundational model framework could change the way our apps work. These on-device AI features could certainly position Apple as a serious contender in AI-related technology. And with Apple's industry-leading processors, this might finally put their AI struggles behind them. All this said, let's not forget that last year Apple promised and showed off AI-related features that were not ready yet. My trust in the company has eroded a little bit, but I'm hoping Apple will not do the same mistake twice. For the new design language and this LLM framework to be adopted by apps, Apple also needs to sort out its relationships with the developers. If developers are expected to spend this summer doing the hard work of porting their apps to the new software versions, Apple has to play nice with them, resolve the issues around the App Store fees, provide alternate payment systems, and basically be a good partner. When the iOS 7 redesign came out, every developer I knew jumped in to update their apps. I hope we see the same momentum this year because, let's be honest, Apple needs developers for all of this to come to fruition.